Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by John Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Cucaruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. John and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, John and Jim.
Welcome to another episode of Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of fish and wildlife in our country. I'm John Gassett with the Wildlife Management Institute and co-host for Connecting with Conservation. I'm here with my fellow co-host, Jim Cucaruto from Outdoor Stewards of Conservation. Morning, Jim. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, we had some technical difficulties. We're finding ways to screw up the internet, but it's worth the wait because today we got a great guest, kind of a repeat to the Connecting with Conservation series of communications that we have on there. But Brandon Maddox from Silencer Central. Sorry for the delays and the technical issues, but thanks for sticking with us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal background, and then we'll get into the business of silencers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in the Southeast. I think people find it odd that I'm a registered pharmacist. I went to pharmacy school there in North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I spent a lot of time in the pharmaceutical industry. Did business degree, master's there at Duke in North Carolina as well. And then moved to South Dakota and started Silencer Central and started that in 2005. So a little over 20 years now. We're the largest, Silencer Central is the largest silencer dealer in the country, and we have locations in 42 states. And Silencer Central is probably most famous for doing all the paperwork for you digitally to buy a suppressor and then shipping it right to your front door once it's approved.
Yeah, it is seemingly a daunting task, but you made it real easy. And I think that's why you did it, because wasn't it hard for you to get one at first or something?
Oh, yeah. It was painful. Yeah, a couple of things, like my father-in-law, also a pharmacist, had a federal farms license in his pharmacy. And so I think that gave me enough sort of like, okay, it could be done. You can get a license. And then, just a sort of a poor purchase experience locally where they kind of handed me the paperwork and said, go figure it out. And after I bought two, I was like, the third one, I told my wife, I'm going to buy myself. It'd be easier just to get a license than have to figure out all the paperwork myself.
So, Brandon, I had the similar experience when I got my first one, and it almost felt like you were doing something criminal. I mean, it's like you got to go get fingerprinted. You got to get the cars. You got to get fingerprinted. You got to go get the sheriff to sign in Kentucky. The sheriff has to sign off on it. And it's like, wow, this is, and then it took 18 months, submitted everything. And it's like, you almost forget you bought it,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I got really no direction, and you just think about filling out government forms, what if I do it wrong? I don't know. I felt very vulnerable at the time, and so I was like, I think, it's funny, the goal really wasn't to necessarily start a business at the beginning. It was just sort of make it easier for me to get my own and maybe, sell to a few friends, make it easy for them. And then license is kind of expensive to maintain. And I was like, well, I think we could probably sell a few to help pay for the license, and it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah. I know that, what's always frustrated me, in addition to the process, up until recently, it seems like these online, instantaneous submissions are making things a lot faster. But it always shocked me that, I go hunt in other places where some are fairly much more restrictive on firearms than we are, but yet you can buy suppressors over the counter. South Africa and parts of Europe and all that. It's like they want them on your rifles. They're not happy if you don't have them on them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell everybody how, because there's probably still people out there scratching their heads. Well, it's easy. Well, how's it easy? What do they do when they go to Silencer Central's website? What's the process?
Yeah, good question. So, in simplest terms, buying a suppressor is sort of a title transfer, if you will. It's almost like buying a vehicle, because when you buy a vehicle, they have to transfer the title of ownership from the dealer to you. Kind of the same analogy plays for getting a suppressor. So in simplest terms, Silencer Central has the silencer, and that's your number license to us. We help you through all the paperwork digitally. You can do it all without really even leaving your couch. And then what we do is we ask the feds to transfer the ownership of that silencer from us to you. They'll do a quick background check, just like you would do when you bought a firearm, to make sure you can legally own it. And then once they approve it, we ship it right to your front door. So, we do have to have your fingerprints. It was written in the statutes in 34, so we send you fingerprint cards and ink, and you just do your own. It's pretty easy. The ATF doesn't even really look at the fingerprints, my understanding, because they do the background check based on your information. So, if they aren't perfect, your fingerprints, it's still pretty easy to, do, and then we submit those digitally to the ATF. But, like I said, when I first bought one, the process was, here's the paperwork, you go figure it out. It was kind of like the consumer was driving the process. Think of Silencer Central as driving the process for you. We'll send you everything, and then we're going to text you and say, hey, we got your package, or, hey, we got your information, or, hey, we need you to sign this. So we're kind of driving the whole process. And then, we ship it to your front door, we let you know when it's coming, you're going to see tracking, so it's sort of just a different process where we're driving it, not the consumer's not having to. And people appreciate that. I would say there's probably, 10 to 15% of our people that say later, hey, if you guys had not stayed on top of me, I don't know if I would have even followed up on it, even though I'd already paid for it. Just the whole process of, making sure they signed a document, or it's kind of same thing. DocuSign is essentially what we use. So it's pretty turnkey. It's interesting because it's always hard to know who's the most impressed with our process. Is it someone who bought one locally and went through a horrible process, or if it's the person that had just heard it was horrible and then when they went through it, they're like, wow, that's actually pretty easy. Because you mentioned earlier the approvals. We're seeing ATF approve stuff, like 80% of our approvals are coming back same day. So, it's pretty impressive to, I've seen the bell-shaped curve over the last 20 years. And like you said, it got up to 18 months during the end of Obama's term. And then to be down to real time, pretty much, it's kind of 80% or same day. That's been impressive. It's been a big change.
Yeah, that was my experience. Is that when I went to get the second one, it was like literally 23 hours later, I had approval, and I'm like, I don't even feel like the paperwork's done yet, and it's already, it was already done. And that's impressive. And what my first one I put into a corporation, LLC, or it wasn't a pure gun trust, but it was an LLC. And when I was going to do the second one that way, and they're like, "Oh, it might take a week to get that through." I'm like, I waited 18 months for the first one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, once a week. Yeah, totally.
I wanted to test the process. I said, "Put me an individual one in," and 23 hours later, I was approved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do see it now. It's taking a couple days extra if you do like a trust, but most people feel like it's worth it because then they can, share it or pick who gets it when they pass away.
But I go to all the outdoor shows, Buckmaster, NRA Great American, NWTF. I think I've seen you had kiosks right there at a lot of these shows, live in person, and you can handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone comes to an actual event, and we attend about 200 plus a year, Silencer Central will do all the paperwork right there. Where our staff will do your fingerprints. We'll let you sign everything so that essentially once you leave, it's done. And then once it's approved, we'll just ship it right to your front door. So, I feel like sometimes it's an impulse purchase. People are like, well, I never bought one because of the paperwork. It's like, well, we can do it in about 5 minutes. Why don't you come over here? And then we just knock it out and do it again. They're like, wow, I wish I'd done that a long time ago.
Yes, the two things I've heard from folks about their reluctance to do it. One is obviously the time constraint, the complexity of getting the process, and the other is, the cost of the stamp. And, that can be a barrier because they see it as, this is really just it's like putting another trigger in my rifle. Why do I need to pay $250 to add it on? But, it is what it is. And hopefully whatever becomes of the Hearing Protection Act in Congress, whatever they're going to call it, the next version, maybe it'll address some of that, because it does seem to be a little pricey that, half the price of your average firearm there.
Yeah, no, I think it will. And the other thing people forget too is that typically you can buy one suppressor for your rifle and use it on pretty much all your rifles. So it's kind of that universal. People sometimes think, gosh, if I have to get one for every rifle, but no, it's not normally the case.
Yeah. Well, the name of the podcast, the Connecting with Conservation podcast, there's probably a couple listeners scratching their head, silencers. Why are we talking about that? What does that have to do with conservation? And, we've talked, all different types of people, and there's always a connection to conservation for our guests. And you have a huge connection with conservation. When we're out there visiting your facility, I saw these awards, with NWTF and Mule Deer. You support them, all these conservation groups, tremendously. So inform everybody about how Silencer Central helps support conservation.
Yeah, good question. So, I mentioned earlier I've been doing this for about 20 years. So, when I first started selling suppressors and Silencer Central, the problem I found is most people didn't realize that suppressors were legal, and most people didn't realize you could hunt with suppressors. And us being in South Dakota, there's probably a lot of people around the country who didn't even know we existed. Just geographically, we're kind of not in the center of the most populous part of the country. So, you know, um, I reached out to some of the conservation groups and I said, hey, is there a way for us to partner together where maybe we can attend your events and then we could also supply a product to you all and then you could auction it off at your events and then whatever you get for your auction item, we'll let you keep 100% of that. And, it sounds simple. And I would say that it took a while to get the conservation teams to buy into it. I mean, when they first heard suppressor, silencer, they thought, well, we don't know what we think about that. We need to learn a little bit more information. And, it took a while. And just sort of one by one, I would meet with their boards and I would talk to them about the benefits. And I said, hey, um, benefit for both of us, get our name out there and let people know you can help with these things, but also create it as a fundraiser for you all. So I would say really every conservation group out there, nonprofits that I would say almost every one of them work with Silencer Central. And I think we're on track for giving away $10 million this year. So we let them keep 100% of whatever they auction it for. So I guess, my ask would be if anyone's listening and they have a current group that they're a part of that's conservation related that doesn't have Silencer Central silencers at their event for an auction, just give us a call. We'd be happy to donate free products. And there's very few examples out there in the industry where you can get 100% donation and get to keep 100% of it. So it's been a great win-win. I'm not naive. It benefited us. It got the name out there and also got the thought out there of hunting suppressed. Some people used to think, well, I only shoot my deer rifle 3 times, 2 to sight it in and 1 at a deer. What would I need a suppressor for? But after they use one, they're like, wow, I wish I'd done this, 15, 20 years ago. So it's been a real win-win. And, a lot of those organizations out there, we're actually their top donor. Like we give them more money than anyone else. So it's been fun to sort of grow with them and help support their efforts. And, it's been fun to kind of watch too, the number of people that before didn't even know that you could hunt with a suppressor, and now they're enjoying hunting suppressed.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that the way folks thought about them as far as hunting with them or using them for personal reasons, probably sort of these generations now that are coming into play that that's what they saw on TV. They think these things are deadly silent. They're only the mafia and assassins use them. It's like, first of all, they're not silent. But they bring the noise to a manageable level. But I think a lot of people feel like, that's their image of a suppressor until they actually use one, and then they use one, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, it does quiet it down, but it still makes a noise. It just doesn't blast everybody in the neighborhood. So.
Yeah, it definitely helps with recoil too, which is typically beneficial to hunters. And the other thing too is if you're hunting an area and maybe say you miss, you don't have to then relocate somewhere else because typically it's not going to scare all the game around there. You could probably still get another shot or get a chance to maybe shoot an animal in that area and not have to relocate.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you another conservation benefit I think of suppressors, an indirect tie. I'm gonna make this, Jim, is because NSSF back in the day was real supportive of this to help get it across the goal line, but was the Shooting Range Improvement Act, which incentivized agencies to build more shooting ranges so that people could have a place to go and shoot and spend excise tax dollars. Well, I can tell you as a former state director, the number one issue we had with siting shooting ranges was noise abatement. It's noise and lead abatement. And, I always wondered why we didn't tie on hearing improvement or hearing protection with shooting range improvement, because where you need the shooting ranges are where the people are, and the people don't want to hear the gunshots, on Sunday mornings. So it does make a huge difference in those more, suburban, urban areas on ranges.
Yeah, and NSSF doing a great job working with state agencies on making sure they, use some of those excise tax dollars coming from conservation to also support range development. And it's just makes it easier when they say, okay, well, you feel free to bring your suppressor with you in 42 states, right? I don't know who the 8 are, but I recently moved from Connecticut where I could own one, but I couldn't hunt with it. But now I'm in South Carolina, so I can do both. Look at me go. So, but yeah, target shooting is a great, opportunity to, go ahead and find one of those kiosks if you're at a show, or visit your website to get them. But talk about hunting. I follow you on social media, and you seem to find some time to get outdoors every once in a while doing some hunting. Anything recently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did a prairie dog hunt a couple of weeks ago. I mean, that was fun. I mean, that's kind of actually what got me into the whole suppressor game. I started shooting prairie dogs and thought, gosh, I think I could probably shoot more if I could quiet this rifle down a little bit. And that's honestly how I got into this. But yeah, speaking of conservation, so at the Dallas Safari Club, we auctioned off, it was kind of without me knowing, they auctioned off a hunt with me, and it went for $30,000, which surprised me. But basically, all the money went to Dallas Safari Club, and then I got to spend a few days in the western part of South Dakota prairie dog hunting with a gentleman and his son that came here from Indiana. So it was fun to get to know them, and also spend a couple days out in the field. But yeah, I'm trying to think about next hunt because that's what everyone thinks about, right? Where am I headed next? I think it's probably duck hunting in Canada in like September. So I don't think I got too much planned right now.
I know y'all sell you're one of the largest suppressor suppliers, if not the largest in the country. But you have your own line of suppressors too that you make, the Vanish series, correct?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I always tell people I was working a gun show. I mean, this is probably close to 20 years ago. It was the first time I worked the Pier Gun Show. And Pier, South Dakota is really well known for, it's a great place to live for hunting and outdoorsmanship. And I could just tell the silencers I was selling at that event were more tactical oriented. And those gentlemen at that show were just not buying. They loved the idea of a suppressor. They didn't like the idea of something more tactical. They wanted something more hunting. They wanted something lightweight like titanium. They wanted something that would come apart to clean so they could get the carbon out. So literally that day at that show, I called the manufacturer and said, "Hey, can you make a line of suppressors for us that would be better for the outdoor market? Just lighter weight, a little bit quieter, and also could come apart to clean." And that's kind of where it evolved, the Banish suppressors. And then within the last year, we've started selling them to distributors, and then distributors sell them to other dealers. So, right now there's a lot of interest at the local dealers for suppressors. So not only can you buy Banish suppressors from us directly at Silencer Central, but also now we're selling directly, to the wholesalers who then are selling the dealers. So it even gets it out there more. And we feel like there's a big market for that. Everyone was sort of focused only on the tactical market forever. We were really the only ones that focused kind of solely on the hunting market. Now I see other people trying to come into the hunting market, but I think the hunting market's a big market out there. People like the idea of, being able to still communicate while you're hunting if everyone's using a suppressor, and, even for duck hunting, not have to worry about, maybe the ears, the dogs. So we have a nice shotgun silencer that we're launching here in a couple of weeks. It's really nice. It's 3D printed titanium. It's really lightweight. It's small. It's more for hunting. There's some others that have come out on the market over the last 10 or 15 years that have been more focused for tactical, whereas this is very hunting focused. Doesn't block your line of sight and works really well. We've worked with Federal a lot on it, on the ammunition, to make sure that everything worked out there. But we're excited about the Banish line. It's the number one selling line of suppressors in the marketplace, and we feel like making it available to other dealers as well will be a kind of a win-win for everyone. Win-win for consumers that maybe have a local dealer they have a relationship with, and then also a win for people that buy it through Silencer Central.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear it. I love duck hunting as well. I don't know if I'll have the time to do it, but I'm excited to hear about that new product. I'm going to have to check that out for sure. All right, so connecting with conservation, you give away millions of dollars to help these worth of product to help conservation groups. Sounds like you sell yourself out there to go hunt with and make some money that way.
Yeah, they didn't tell me about it until afterwards. I was like, wow, that's actually, I couldn't believe someone would pay $30,000 for a 2-day hunt with me.
Hey, take it, right? That's awesome. And you're traveling around buying hunting licenses in different states and, different countries. So, but you also donate your time, right? I mean, I know the three of us are members of the Arachnid Sportsman Society, but you're also the treasurer of CSF. And do you work with some? What's going on at CSF?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, I'm on the executive board at CSF. I've been on the board for a couple of years, and they invited me to be the treasurer. I reminded them I'm not a CPA, but they're like, nope, we think you'd work out well. So it's been good. Um, yeah, the good thing there is we meet quarterly and talk about some of these, federal and state issues on the conservation level, which it's sort of a win-win. It kind of helps me stay up to speed on what's happening locally, local areas, but also federally, and then also thinking about how to, sort of address those. And you know, I, CSF has been very active in trying to get the big beautiful bill to remove what Senator out of Utah wanted to, sell off some federal land. So as of at least today, it's taken out. I don't expect that it'll come back, even though Senator Lee might like for it to. But I think that was a huge win from a conservation perspective to keep the land available. I tell my staff we do a stand-up meeting every morning at 8:30, and I told them, that the land really is for us and our grandkids and their kids. As soon as the government sells it, they're just going to spend the money. So there's no win for Americans to take that land out of conservation. So I was glad to see that I was getting worried there for a while, but I was glad to see that was averted. So that's good. Also, I don't know if it's been announced publicly, but also you mentioned NSSF. I recently got on the NSSF board as well. So they were looking for someone that had sort of the silencer expertise, and that's been coming up a lot in the big beautiful bill as well. So it's been a benefit to sit on that board as well and get to know different groups and more farm focused and get to know some of the folks in the industry that have been around for a long time. So it's been a good experience, and yeah, I enjoy giving back time. It's fun. I feel like you learn a lot that you didn't even know was out there. It just kind of increases your knowledge base.
Yeah. So speaking about the ongoing legislation for the budget, I know, of course, the hearing protection language got stripped out under the Byrd rule, which basically wasn't germane. That bill's been offered in several forms several times, and I'm sure it's coming back as a standalone. I think it has a lot of support. What do you think its chances of success are, and also, how does that impact your business? Because you got a business model of helping people through the federal process. There's a bill that might remove the federal process.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah. So a couple things there. So, banished suppressors, we did 125 million in sales last year just in the banished suppressors. So my take on that is if the regulations went away, like through a Hearing Protection Act, wow, we would be so busy. Our manufacturers, because my wife asked the same question. I'm like, well, if I could do 125 million with two hands tied behind my back, think what I could do with two hands in front. Because if you look at the math, only about 25% of dealers in America sell silencers because of the paperwork involved. So there's about 80,000, dealers out there total, and there's only about 20,000 of them that are actually selling suppressors. So, of course, every dealer who's not currently selling suppressors would be selling suppressors if the paperwork part went away. I think it'd be a huge boon for us. I'm hopeful that it just, it seems to get the information out there more. I always worried, like, how is this going to affect, if people thought it was going to go through and then it doesn't, or they're not going to buy, or does it hurt demand or help demand? This happened in 2017 as well. And what I found is it helps demand because it's educated more people about suppressors. 20 years ago when I first started this, people thought they were all illegal. So it was a hard sell to say, hey, no, they're not illegal. And then the next sell was, no, you can hunt with them. So people are calling me who don't know anything about firearms. They're like, hey, on Fox News, I saw they were talking about doing this with suppressors. So just getting the education out there will help. So do I think it'll pass? I think it will pass at some point. I think that, when I talk to my legislative officials, they say that there's so much interest in it. They get so many calls, so many letters that either from like a lawsuit perspective, at some point they determine silencers are protected by the Second Amendment, and then they could, go through that route and deregulate them that way, or just as more and more people use them. And I'll say this is a change in my mind. At first, I thought it would be difficult to get them until you had more people using them. But as, even now, more and more people are interested in them and using them, I think there's a good chance it would pass. So think of us as managing two businesses. I have one business, which is Silencer Central, which does the service, but then also I have another business that's product, that's the Vanish Suppressors. So Silencer Central sells everyone's products, but we just so happen to benefit from, also owning Vanish. And one reason why I created Vanish was to just be able to control that. I always had so many gun shows in the first quarter of the year. I couldn't find a manufacturer that could supply the number of silencers I needed. Plus, I mentioned earlier the sort of the more of a product tailored towards the hunting market. But we've tried to position ourselves very well so that if you have two businesses and then the market does change, I could see Silencer Central switching to maybe being an online website that would sell silencers if they became deregulated. And then you could buy it online and we would just ship it to your local dealer and you could do the background check there. And then our team would sort of pivot and focus more of its efforts on Banish and making sure that these other 75% of dealers out there that aren't currently selling suppressors have the suppressors they need for their hunters and shooters and hobbyists. So again, anytime there's some kind of big legislation at this large of a scale, I feel like it gets more people interested in the marketplace. I mentioned I was in pharmaceuticals before, and I found that, the more I talked about a particular disease state, the more often the physician typically would treat it. So I feel like the same thing with this, as even though they are trying to make changes, I think it's positive because it gets consumers more interested in thinking about suppressors. So I always tell our team, of course, it makes them nervous when there's things changing. And they always ask me, what about the change makes you the most nervous? And I always say, it's human nature to be worried about the unknown. So we just plan for both. And we kind of have a playbook on the shelf. And whichever one happens, we pull that playbook off. Over the weekend, they added that language back to remove the $200 tax stamp. And, fortunately, being from a small state, I have good working relationships. I'm dressed up today because my congressman is announcing he's running for governor. So I told him I would come and, congratulate Dusty Johnson on his, candidacy to run for governor. So I have a good relationship with him and his staff. And, of course, we're fortunate to have, John Thune, the majority leader, and I have good relationships with his staff. So they kind of keep me up to date with what's going on, and it's been helpful. But right now, it looks like the big, beautiful bill's got the $200 tax potentially going away, and it would be the same process now, but there would be no tax. So I think that would, I think my team is saying our average silencer is about $800. So on average, that's what our average sales amount is for a suppressor. So if you can take that $200 tax off that they're currently paying, I think that's only going to open the market further. And I think that as the market continues to open, at some point, I feel like they'll be deregulated.
Yeah, I always felt like that $250 tax is a sin tax, because the 4473, I feel like to buy the firearm, there's no fee associated with that, but to buy this thing that goes on the firearm, I got to pay $250. So it's not logical, but not much in government is.
No, it was originally set up for machine guns and was considered 100% tax on a machine gun. So it's, I guess we're just fortunate they didn't increase over time.
Well, that's a great example. The public lands, trying to sell public lands, without public approval is a great example of the voice of the sportsman, because I have friends of mine that are like, are they selling public lands? I said, well, it doesn't look like they are, because millions of people that hunt, fish, trap, and shoot sent letters and called Congressman and Senator Lee and all that stuff, and he ended up seemingly changing his mind. So if you're listening, your voice does matter. Make sure if there's something important to you, if you want to get rid of the tax stamp, if you want to save public lands, you have to write those letters. You have to make those phone calls. But we certainly thank you, Brandon, for everything you're doing. We covered everything that how you help support conservation, all the great work you're doing with the nonprofits, Outdoor Stewards of Conservation benefits from the certificate program that you have there. I'm going to try to get John and his dad in on it too. They run a nonprofit for helping disabled veterans get on hunts and stuff. So you do great work. We want to thank you for that. And I don't know if there's not anything else you want to cover, or if not, just let us know where we can find more info on Silencer Central.
Yeah, no, just like I mentioned earlier, if someone's currently involved in conservation and they have an event where they're raising money and they want a suppressor, call us. We'd be happy to donate that. That's, it's an honor for us to get involved. So basically it's just silencercentral.com, or you can even do a Google search for our phone number and call us direct. We got a whole team here that'll help walk you through the process. I think some people get intimidated as to not knowing where to start. they might prefer just to call us up and talk to and have a person that, kind of tells you the whole process and kind of manages it for you. But no, appreciate the opportunity and appreciate you all helping us, work together to get the word about conservation and suppressors out there more.
Well, Brandon, thanks for coming on. It's one of my favorite topics when I talk about firearms is suppressors. I use them regularly, not on everything because I still got to buy a few more, so I'll probably be in the market here soon. Jim likes to say I'm going to go bankrupt buying stuff from our guests. But to our listeners, if you're interested knowing more about suppressors or about how to acquire them, if you're interested in purchasing one, go to Silencer Central's website and take a look at it. It's an easy process to do. It's not nearly as scary as a lot of people make it out to be. So they're wonderful to have on your firearms. Cuts down on noise, cuts down on disturbing your neighbors, and certainly helps protect your hearing. So take a look at Silencer Central's website. Appreciate you having us on. And if you like this episode, please subscribe to us. Like it and subscribe. That helps us and helps you as well. You'll get notifications on when our future episodes are coming out. Other than that, we'll see you in the woods or on the water. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.